to our wonderful community at Infidelity Tales Lab. Welcome and thank you. Your presence keeps us motivated. Quick question, what part of the globe are you tuning in from? Whether it's morning or night where you are, let us know. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. Foundations of Sand. Russell Montgomery wiped the sweat from his brow as he inspected the construction site of what would become the crown jewel of his real estate empire, the Montgomery Plaza. At 45, Russell had built his development company from nothing, surviving the 2008 crash when others folded, and emerging stronger by acquiring distressed properties others couldn't handle. "Boss," the supplier called. "The Italian marbles delayed again," said Hector, his project manager. Russell nodded, his broad shoulders tense beneath his tailored suit. "Tell them if it's not here by Friday. We're canceling and going with the Turkish supplier." His voice carried the authoritative edge that had earned him respect in an industry dominated by inherited wealth and connections. Unlike his competitors, Russell hadn't attended Ivy League schools or inherited a family business. He'd started as a carpenter's apprentice at 16 after his alcoholic father abandoned the family, working double shifts to put himself through night school. By 30, he'd completed his first small development. By 40, Montgomery Development was handling projects worth tens of millions. The phone in his pocket vibrated. A text from his wife, Adrian. Dinner with the Whitakers canceled. Going out with Brooke instead. "Don't wait up." Russell frowned. Third time this month. Adrian had been increasingly distant in their 17-year marriage. He typed back, "Anniversary dinner tomorrow still on?" The reply came quickly. "Of course. Wouldn't miss it." Later that evening, Russell sat at his home office desk, reviewing blueprints for a new development while occasionally glancing at the family portrait on his wall. Himself, Adrian with her striking auburn hair, their daughter Vanessa, 19, home from her first year at UCLA, and son Dominic, 16, with his perpetual half-smile. The sound of the garage door opening pulled his attention. Russell checked his watch, 11:47 p.m. He heard Adrienne's heels clicking on the marble floor, followed by her slipping into their bedroom without stopping by his office to say goodnight, something that had become routine lately. When Russell entered their bedroom 20 minutes later, Adrienne was already pretending to be asleep. He noticed a faint scent, an unfamiliar cologne that definitely wasn't hers. Next to her nightstand lay a matchbook from the Ravens Lounge, an upscale bar downtown that wasn't anywhere near Brooke's neighborhood. Russell stood in the dark for a long moment, the pieces falling into place like the foundation of a building he never wanted to construct. Chapter 2. Fault Lines. The Montgomery anniversary dinner reservation was at Castellano's, the high-end Italian restaurant where Russell had proposed 17 years earlier. Russell arrived early, instructing the staff to prepare the special wine he'd ordered weeks ago, a vintage from the year they met. At 7:30, there was no sign of Adrian. By 8:15, Russell had drained his first glass alone, ignoring the pitying glances from the waitstaff. At 8:45, he received the text, "So sorry. Meeting with real estate agent about mom's condo ran late. Can we reschedule?" Instead of responding, Russell paid for the untouched meal and drove to his mother-in-law's condo building. The security guard, recognizing him, mentioned that he'd just missed Mrs. Montgomery. She left with that tall fellow with the fancy watch. They'd been coming by to check on the place since Mrs. Palmer went to Florida. "Tall fellow?" Russell asked, his voice eerily calm despite the rage building inside him. "Yes, sir. Mr. Bradley, I think. They've been here several times this month." Bradley. The name registered immediately. Lawrence Bradley, the silver-haired investment genius who joined their country club last year. Recently divorced, mid-50s, with a smile that showed too many teeth and a habit of touching women's arms when speaking to them. Russell drove to the Ravens Lounge, where the bartender recognized him as a generous tipper. When Russell mentioned he was looking for his wife, the bartender replied, "The lady with the auburn hair? She's a regular with Mr. Bradley. They usually take the corner booth." That night, Russell hired Diana Vega, a former military intelligence officer turned private investigator. "I need everything on Lawrence Bradley and evidence of my wife's affair," he instructed. "And I need absolute discretion." 3 weeks later, Diana delivered a comprehensive file. Lawrence Bradley had married and divorced 3 wealthy women in the past 15 years. Each divorce had left him substantially wealthier. He specifically targeted women in long-term marriages to successful men, particularly those feeling neglected due to their husbands' busy careers. The surveillance photos showed Adrian and Lawrence in intimate situations at hotels, restaurants, and even on his yacht. Text message records revealed they'd been involved for 7 months. Most damning were audio recordings from their recent meetings discussing plans for Adrian to divorce Russell. Once the divorce is final, we'll have at least $20 million, Lawrence had said. That workaholic won't even notice you're gone until the papers are served. Adrian's laughter had cut through Russell like a blade. Russ built himself up from nothing. He's good at business, but he has no idea what's happening in his own home. Dominic already thinks you're amazing, and Vanessa hardly speaks to him anyway. It'll be a clean break. Russell listened to the recordings in his office, his expression hardening with each word. When he finally spoke to Diana, his voice was cold steel. Find out everything about Bradley's finances. I want to know his weaknesses, his vices, and everyone he's ever wronged. Russell's eyes reflected something dangerous. And give me information on his previous wives. Chapter 3. The Demolition. On a rainy Thursday, Adrian Montgomery received divorce papers at her yoga class. By evening, the news had spread through their social circle. Russell had moved out of their home and into the penthouse apartment above his office building, leaving without confrontation or explanation. Dad's gone. Dominic informed his sister Vanessa over the phone. Mom says they're separating and it's mutual, but she was crying when she thought I couldn't hear. Vanessa, away at college, was shocked but not entirely surprised. Did she say why? No, but Lawrence came over to support her. He's been here a lot lately. Within days, Lawrence had practically moved into the Montgomery residence, helping Adrian through this difficult transition. Meanwhile, Russell remained silent, not responding to calls from friends or family, focusing entirely on work. The preliminary divorce hearing revealed Russell's strategy. He'd transferred majority ownership of Montgomery Development to a trust years earlier, a detail Adrian's attorney had overlooked. The judge appointed a financial evaluator to determine the marital assets, but it was clear the settlement wouldn't be the windfall Lawrence had anticipated. After the hearing, Adrian approached Russell for the first time since he'd left. Why are you making this so difficult? We can end this amicably. Russell studied her face, the face he'd loved for nearly 2 decades, and felt nothing. Amicably? Like discussing your plans with Lawrence to take half my company while sleeping in our bed. The color drained from Adrian's face. You knew. For months. Russell's voice remained unervingly calm. Did you really think I built an empire by being oblivious to betrayal? Tell Lawrence I look forward to meeting him properly. After all, he's spending time with my son. That evening, Lawrence comforted Adrian at their home. Don't worry, darling. He's just posturing. Once the evaluator digs into his finances, we'll get what we deserve. What they didn't know was that Russell had already set in motion a plan that would destroy them both, not through legal battles, but through a calculated dismantling of everything they thought they knew. In his penthouse, Russell stared out at the city lights, phone in hand. It's time, he told Diana. Contact Bradley's ex-wives and tell Nolan I'm ready to meet. Nolan Price had once been Lawrence's business partner before being forced out of their investment firm years ago. He lost everything and had been waiting patiently for a chance at revenge. Now Russell was offering him exactly that. Chapter 4. Blueprint for Vengeance. 6 months into the divorce proceedings, Russell Montgomery was unrecognizable to those who knew him before. The successful but somewhat soft-around-the-middle developer had transformed into a lean, focused weapon. Every morning began with a punishing workout in his private gym, followed by meetings with his expanding team of allies. Bradley's financial situation is worse than we thought, Diana reported in Russell's office. He's leveraged to the hilt. 3 failed investments in the past year, and he's been borrowing against his assets to maintain appearances. Russell nodded, studying the financial documents spread across his desk. And my son, Diana's expression softened slightly. Dominic is struggling. His grades are dropping, and he's been in 2 fights at school. He idolizes Bradley, who's been playing the father figure role. Expensive gifts, sports games, the works. And Vanessa? She's maintained her distance from both Adrian and Bradley. She's tried calling you several times. Russell's jaw tightened. Not yet. She chose her side when she told her mother about my offshore accounts. Accounts that don't actually exist, Diana reminded him. The misinformation worked. Bradley and Adrian are convinced you're hiding millions. The door opened, and Nolan Price entered, a thin man with calculating eyes who'd once lost everything to Lawrence Bradley's manipulations. It's confirmed, Nolan announced. Bradley's taking investor meetings for the Westlake project, using your preliminary designs as if they're finalized. Russell smiled coldly. Perfect. And our inside man. In position. Bradley believes Flynn is a legitimate international investor eager to get in on the ground floor. Flynn McAdams was another of Bradley's victims, a contractor who'd been bankrupted after Bradley pulled financing mid-project years earlier. Now operating under a new identity, Flynn was playing the role of a wealthy European developer interested in Bradley's vision. The Westlake property? Russell asked. The owners agreed to our terms, Diana confirmed. She'll string Bradley along, but only sign with us. Russell turned to the window, surveying the city where he'd built his legacy. Bradley's convincing investors to fund a development on land he doesn't own and never will, using plans he stole from me. Meanwhile, he's draining his accounts to impress my wife and son. Your wife is getting suspicious, Diana noted. She expected the divorce to be settled by now. The judge's continuances are making her nervous. Judge Matthews owes me for financing his daughter's cancer treatment when the insurance wouldn't cover it, Russell said matter-of-factly. He'll drag this out as long as we need. Later that evening, Russell received an unexpected visitor at his penthouse. Vanessa stood in his doorway, her expression a mixture of anger and concern. You couldn't answer my calls? She demanded. Russell studied his daughter. You made your choice when you helped your mother access my personal files. I didn't know what she was looking for. She said she needed insurance documents. Vanessa pushed past him into the apartment. Mom's different now. She's obsessed with money, with the divorce. And Lawrence's, there's something off about him. Russell poured himself a whiskey, not offering one to his daughter. You're an adult, Vanessa. You made your choice. What about Dom? He's just a kid. Lawrence has him completely fooled. Tears welled in her eyes. I heard them talking about sending him to some boarding school in Switzerland after the divorce, away from everyone he knows. For the first time, Russell's composure cracked slightly. When did you hear this? Last week. I came home to get some things. They didn't know I was there. Vanessa hesitated. I've been doing some research on Lawrence. Did you know he's been married 3 times before? And each wife was wealthy when they married and almost broke after. Russell studied his daughter with new interest. What else have you discovered? He has a pattern. He finds wealthy married women, becomes their confidant, convinces them their husbands are hiding assets, then helps them divorce. Once he has access to their money, it vanishes in investments. Vanessa pulled out her phone, showing Russell her research. I'm studying investigative journalism, Dad. This is what I do. For the first time in months, Russell felt a flicker of pride. What do you want from me, Vanessa? Let me help you. Whatever you're planning, and I know you're planning something, let me be part of it. For Dom's sake, if not for yours. Russell considered his daughter carefully, then nodded once. Be at this address tomorrow at noon. Don't tell anyone where you're going. Not even your boyfriend. I don't have a boyfriend, Vanessa replied with a hint of her father's determination. I've been too busy investigating the man who's trying to steal from my family. Chapter 5. Laying the foundation. The warehouse space Russell had converted into his operations center hummed with activity. Boards displayed photos, timelines, and connection maps between Lawrence Bradley and his previous victims. Diana supervised 2 analysts processing financial data, while Nolan coordinated with Flynn about their next investor meeting. When Vanessa entered, everyone fell silent. Everyone, this is my daughter, Vanessa. She's joining us. Russell's tone made it clear this wasn't up for discussion. Over the next hours, Russell revealed the extent of his plan to Vanessa. Lawrence Bradley had convinced Adrian that Russell was hiding at least $30 million in offshore accounts. In reality, those accounts were elaborate facades created by Russell's team, digital breadcrumbs leading nowhere. Bradley's convinced your mother to invest every penny she can access into his Westlake development, Russell explained. A project that will never break ground because I already have the land under contract. But Mom doesn't have millions to invest, Vanessa protested. She's liquidated her inheritance, maxed out credit lines, and borrowed against her portion of the house, Diana interjected. Bradley's convinced her it's the opportunity of a lifetime. Meanwhile, Nolan continued, we have investors lined up ready to pull out at the critical moment, leaving Bradley overextended and unable to return the money. Vanessa processed this information. So you're going to bankrupt him? That's the revenge. Russell smiled thinly. That's just the beginning. Bradley's previous wives have agreed to testify about how he manipulated them. We've documented every false statement he's made to investors. When this collapses, he'll face criminal charges. And Mom, Vanessa asked quietly. Russell's expression hardened. She made her choice. She's still our mother, Vanessa insisted. And she's being manipulated by an expert. Who told you I was hiding money? Who convinced you to search my office? Russell demanded. It wasn't Bradley. It was your mother. She wasn't tricked into betraying me. She chose to. The tension was broken by Diana's phone ringing. After a brief conversation, she turned to Russell. Dominic got into another fight at school. He's been suspended. Russell checked his watch. Adrian will be at her therapy appointment for another hour. Bradley's meeting investors downtown. He grabbed his keys. I'll handle this. At Westwood Academy, Russell found his son sitting outside the principal's office, sporting a split lip and bruised knuckles. What are you doing here? Dominic asked, his voice a mixture of surprise and resentment. You're still my son, Russell replied simply. Principal Martinez welcomed Russell into her office. Mr. Montgomery, I'm surprised to see you instead of Mrs. Montgomery or Mr. Bradley. I'm still Dominic's father, Russell stated firmly. What happened? Dominic punched another student who suggested that his mother was. She paused delicately, involved with Mr. Bradley before your separation. Russell turned to his son. Is that true? Dominic stared at the floor. Lawrence said, I need to defend our family's honor. That you abandoned us, and we need to stick together. Russell felt a surge of cold fury that he carefully contained. Principal Martinez, may I have a moment alone with my son? Once they were alone, Russell sat across from Dominic. Son, do you remember when you were 10 and you broke my signed baseball trying to practice indoors? Dominic looked up, confused by the change in subject. Yes, you were terrified to tell me. But when you finally did, what happened? You were mad. You said honesty was more important than any possession. Russell nodded. I've never lied to you, Dominic. I didn't abandon our family. I left because your mother was having an affair with Lawrence for months before I moved out. Dominic's face flushed. You're lying. Russell pulled out his phone and played a brief audio clip. Adrian and Lawrence laughing about deceiving Russell. The color drained from Dominic's face. Mom said, she said you two grew apart. That Lawrence only came into the picture after. I know what they told you, Russell said quietly. I'm not asking you to choose sides. I'm just asking you to question what you've been told. As they left the principal's office, Russell handed Dominic a phone. This is private. Only use it to contact me if you need to. I'm still your father, regardless of what's happening between your mother and me. That evening, Russell briefed his team on a new development. Bradley's accelerated his timeline. He's collecting final investments for Westlake next week instead of next month. He's getting desperate, Nolan observed. His creditors must be closing in. What about the wedding? Diana asked. Russell's expression darkened. Still on for 3 weeks from now, according to my sources. They've booked the ballroom at the Renaissance Hotel. Vanessa, who had spent the day going through financial records, looked up in shock. They're getting married? Already? The divorce isn't even final. Bradley needs legal access to what he thinks is your mother's settlement money, Russell explained. They're planning a quick ceremony as soon as the divorce is finalized, which you're delaying through Judge Matthews, Vanessa finished, understanding dawning. You're timing everything to collapse around them at once. Russell nodded. The final phase begins now. Vanessa, I need you to do something that might be difficult. What? Reconcile with your mother. Tell her you were wrong about me, that you believe Bradley now. I need eyes inside their operation. Vanessa hesitated only briefly before nodding. I can do that. But what about Dominic? Leave your brother to me, Russell said, checking his phone as a message appeared. Our final player has just confirmed. Everything is falling into place. Chapter 6, Pressure Points. Lawrence Bradley considered himself a master strategist, but lately, things weren't proceeding according to plan. The divorce should have been settled months ago, but Judge Matthews kept finding reasons for delays. Meanwhile, his creditors were becoming increasingly insistent about repayment. The Westlake investment is solid, he assured Adrian as they discussed finances in their living room. Once we close this round of funding, we'll have enough to pay off my temporary debts and secure our future. Adrian seemed less confident. Russell's lawyers keep finding technicalities. What if the divorce settlement isn't what we expected? Trust me, darling. I've been through this before. Once the judge sees the evidence of his hidden accounts, we'll get everything we deserve. Lawrence kissed her forehead reassuringly. And having Vanessa back on our side helps our case immensely. Vanessa had returned to the fold 2 weeks earlier, apologizing for doubting them and offering to help however she could. Lawrence was initially suspicious, but warmed to her presence when she offered insights into her father's business practices. What Lawrence didn't know was that every night, Vanessa transmitted detailed reports to her father's team. She documented conversations, photographed documents, and monitored their plans while maintaining her role as the supportive daughter. Across town, Russell met with Dominic weekly for lunch. Meetings kept secret from Adrian and Lawrence. The boy remained conflicted, but was increasingly uncomfortable with Lawrence's influence over his mother. He's pushing her to liquidate everything, Dominic told his father during one such lunch. Last night, they were arguing about Mom's jewelry, the pieces from Grandma that she always said would go to Vanessa someday. Lawrence wants her to sell them for the investment. Russell listened carefully. And how do you feel about that? Dominic pushed his food around on his plate. Mom seems scared sometimes. Not of Lawrence, but of what might happen if his plans don't work. She talked about taking out a second mortgage yesterday. I see. Russell kept his expression neutral. And how are things at school? Better since we talked. I've been spending more time focusing on college applications. Dominic hesitated. Dad, Lawrence keeps talking about this Swiss boarding school, saying it would look better for college. Do you want to go to Switzerland? No, Dominic admitted. But Mom seems to agree with everything Lawrence says lately. Russell placed his hand on his son's shoulder. No one is sending you anywhere you don't want to go. I promise you that. Meanwhile, Flynn McAdams, posing as European investor Anton Richter, had become Lawrence's most valued prospect. My clients are prepared to commit $20 million to Westlake, he informed Lawrence during a meeting, provided we can finalize before month's end. This news should have delighted Lawrence, but it only increased his anxiety. The land deal for Westlake was proving problematic. The owner kept finding issues with the contract language. Lawrence hadn't told anyone, including Adrian, that he didn't actually have the land secured yet. As Lawrence became increasingly desperate, he made critical mistakes. He borrowed money from questionable sources to maintain appearances. He falsified documents to reassure early investors. He convinced Adrian to sign as guarantor on high-interest loans. Russell monitored these developments with cold satisfaction. He's overextended by at least $12 million, he told his team. The moment we pull the rug out, everything collapses. Diana had also made a crucial discovery. Bradley has a sealed record from 20 years ago. I finally got access. She handed Russell a file. Domestic violence charges from his first marriage. Never prosecuted because his wife withdrew the complaint after receiving a settlement. Russell read through the file carefully. This changes the timeline. We move now, not after the wedding. But the wedding is when everything is supposed to culminate, Nolan protested. Your daughter's revelation, the investors pulling out. The wedding still happens, Russell clarified. But now we have insurance that Adrian will go through with it, even when things start falling apart. He turned to Vanessa. I need you to make sure your mother sees these records. not directly from you. Make it appear she discovered them accidentally. Vanessa frowned. You want her to know he's violent before the wedding? Won't that stop her from marrying him? No, Russell said grimly, because by then, she'll be too financially entangled to back out. But it will make her afraid enough to reach out for help when the moment comes. 3 days later, Adrian found the domestic violence records while using Lawrence's laptop. Instead of confronting him immediately, she called Vanessa in panic. I don't know what to do, Adrian confessed. We're so deep into this investment. The wedding is in 10 days. If I confront him, Mom, if he hurt someone before, he could hurt you, Vanessa said, genuinely concerned despite her role in Russell's plan. It's not that simple. I've signed as guarantor on loans. If I back out now, I'll lose everything. Adrienne's voice trembled. Maybe it was a misunderstanding. People change. After hanging up, Vanessa reported the conversation to Russell, who nodded grimly. She'll go through with the wedding. Now we proceed to the final phase. The next day, Lawrence received devastating news. The landowner for Westlake had signed with another developer, Montgomery Development. At the same time, 3 major investors pulled out of his project, citing concerns about the land acquisition. Lawrence kept these developments from Adrian, desperately seeking alternative funding. He approached his last resort, a private lender known for exorbitant rates and aggressive collection methods. Using the last of his legitimate assets as collateral, he secured enough to keep appearances for another 2 weeks. Just enough to get through the wedding and access what he believed would be Adrienne's substantial divorce settlement. What he didn't know was that Russell had ensured the divorce judgment, when it finally came down 3 days before the wedding, will be far less generous than anticipated. Chapter 7. The Final Countdown. The Renaissance Hotel ballroom was decorated with tasteful white and silver arrangements that had cost a small fortune, a fortune Lawrence no longer possessed. The wedding was scheduled for 5 p.m., with 200 guests invited to witness Adrienne Palmer. She'd resumed her maiden name after the divorce, Mary Lawrence Bradley. In the bridal suite, Adrienne sat before the mirror, her makeup artist applying the finishing touches. Vanessa watched from nearby, observing her mother's tense expression. You should be happy, Mom. It's your wedding day, Vanessa said, carefully monitoring her mother's reactions. Adrienne forced a smile. Of course I'm happy. It's just been a stressful week with the divorce finally settled. The settlement had blindsided both Adrienne and Lawrence. Judge Matthews had recognized only a small portion of the claimed marital assets, awarding Adrienne approximately $3 million, a tenth of what Lawrence had anticipated. The hidden offshore accounts they'd been so confident about proving had evaporated under legal scrutiny. Is Lawrence upset about the settlement? Vanessa asked innocently. Adrienne's hands trembled slightly. He was disappointed, naturally, but he says the Westlake project will more than make up for it once it's completed. What Adrienne didn't tell Vanessa was that Lawrence had been nearly unrecognizable with rage when the judgment came down, smashing a vase against the wall and threatening to destroy Montgomery completely. She also didn't mention that she'd signed over nearly $2 million of her settlement to Lawrence's project already, believing it was the only way to recoup their losses. Meanwhile, in another part of the hotel, Lawrence adjusted his bow tie, trying to project confidence despite the maelstrom of disasters surrounding him. That morning, he'd received notice that the private lender was calling in his loan immediately, citing breach of terms. His lawyer had also informed him that several early investors in Westlake were filing complaints with the Securities and Exchange Commission. Lawrence's phone buzzed with a text from Anton Richter. Ashley Flynn, unexpected issues with wire transfer. Need to speak urgently before ceremony. Lawrence cursed under his breath. The $20 million from Richter's European clients was his last hope. Without it, he wouldn't be able to maintain the facade for another week. In yet another room of the hotel, Russell Montgomery sat with his team for final preparations. He wore an expensive suit, but had no intention of attending the ceremony as a guest. Dominic is clear on his role. Russell asked Diana. She nodded. He'll remain with Adrienne's family during the ceremony. He doesn't know the full plan, just that he should stay away from Lawrence and keep his phone on. Russell turned to Vanessa. And you're ready? She took a deep breath. Yes. The waitstaff uniform fits, and I have all the evidence secured. She hesitated. Dad, are you sure about this? Once we do this, there's no going back for any of us. Russell's expression was implacable. Lawrence Bradley has destroyed 3 families before ours. He's violent, manipulative, and has already begun isolating your mother from you and your brother. This ends today. At 4:30 p.m., guests began taking their seats in the ballroom. Among them were several faces unknown to most. Lawrence's 3 ex-wives, positioned strategically throughout the room, investors who had lost money in previous Bradley schemes, and police detectives prepared to act on the evidence Russell had compiled. Lawrence met with Flynn as Richter in a small conference room near the ballroom. My clients are extremely concerned about rumors regarding the land acquisition, Flynn stated coldly. They're requiring additional guarantees before releasing funds. Lawrence fought to maintain his composure. What kind of guarantees? Personal guarantees from you and your new wife against all your assets, and evidence that the SEC complaints are misunderstandings. Those complaints are nothing. Competitors trying to undermine a successful project, Lawrence insisted. I'll get Adrian to sign whatever's needed after the ceremony. Flynn checked his watch. My clients need assurances now, or they walk. $20 million doesn't wait for wedding cake. Lawrence loosened his collar, sweat beading on his forehead. Fine, I'll get her signed now. Give me 30 minutes. As Lawrence hurried toward the bridal suite, he didn't notice Russell Montgomery watching from the shadows, a cold smile on his face. Chapter 8. The Collapse. The wedding processional began precisely at 5 p.m. Lawrence stood at the altar, projecting confidence despite his internal panic. He'd been unable to find Adrian before the ceremony to get her signature on the guarantee documents. Now he would have to wait until after they were married, a delay his financial situation could barely withstand. Adrian walked down the aisle on her brother's arm, her smile fixed and eyes slightly vacant. In the third row, Dominic sat uncomfortably between his aunt and uncle, constantly checking his phone as instructed by his father. The ceremony proceeded without interruption. Vows were exchanged, and by 5:45 p.m., the officiant proclaimed them husband and wife. As they walked back down the aisle, Lawrence whispered urgently to Adrian, "We need to sign some paperwork before the reception." "It's urgent." The cocktail hour began while the wedding party took photographs. Lawrence pulled Adrian into a private room where Flynn waited with documents. "This is Anton Richter, our major investor," Lawrence explained quickly. "The funding is ready, but they need our personal guarantee immediately." Adrian scanned the dense legal document. "I don't understand. This puts everything I have at risk if the project fails." "It won't fail," Lawrence insisted, his charm evaporating under pressure. "Just sign it. Now." Noticing his tone, Flynn played his part. "Perhaps Mrs. Bradley needs time to review with her lawyer. My clients can wait until Monday." "No!" Lawrence's outburst startled both of them. He quickly composed himself. "I apologize. It's wedding day stress. Adrian, darling, this is just a formality. The project is sound." Reluctantly, Adrian signed, a decision she would regret within the hour. By 7 p.m., guests were seated for dinner in the grand ballroom. Lawrence had regained his composure, believing the $20 million would solve his immediate problems. When the time came for toasts, he took the microphone with renewed confidence. "When I met Adrian, she was trapped in a marriage with a man who didn't appreciate her," he began, glass raised. "Today, I'm proud to say I saved her from that broken man." The crowd chuckled appreciatively, raising their glasses. Lawrence, emboldened, continued, "Russell Montgomery may have built buildings, but he never built a real home. That's what Adrian and I—" He was interrupted by a young waitress who approached the head table and took the microphone from his hand. Before security could intervene, she removed her serving cap, revealing herself as Vanessa Montgomery. "I'm Russell Montgomery's daughter," she announced to the stunned crowd, "and I have something to say." Lawrence turned ashen, grabbing for the microphone, but Vanessa deftly moved away. "For the past month, I've been gathering evidence about the man my mother just married," Vanessa continued. "Lawrence Bradley has defrauded investors in the Westlake development, a project for which he doesn't own the land. Murmurs rippled through the crowd as Vanessa continued. He has a history of marrying wealthy women, isolating them from family, then leaving them financially ruined. She gestured to 3 women who stood up around the room. His ex-wives are here today, ready to testify to his pattern of abuse and fraud. Lawrence lunged for Vanessa, but was restrained by the hotel's security staff, who had been briefed in advance. The most damning evidence, Vanessa continued, her voice strong despite her trembling hands, is this recording from yesterday, where Lawrence admits his entire plan. She played an audio clip of Lawrence speaking to a colleague. Once I'm married to her, I'll have legal access to what's left of her settlement. Combined with Richter's investment, I can cover my debts and move on. Montgomery will never recover from what I've done to his family and his reputation. Adrian sat frozen in her seat, horror dawning on her face as the full extent of Lawrence's deception became clear. At that moment, 2 police detectives approached the head table. Lawrence Bradley, we're placing you under arrest for multiple counts of investment fraud, falsifying financial documents, and violation of SEC regulations. As Lawrence was being handcuffed, Russell Montgomery entered the ballroom, his timing impeccable. He didn't speak or draw attention to himself, simply watching as the man who had tried to destroy his family was led away, shouting denials and threats. The wedding guests dispersed in shocked confusion, while Adrian remained seated, tears streaming down her face, the magnitude of her mistakes crashing down upon her. Chapter 9. Ashes and Steel. 3 days after the wedding disaster, Russell sat in his office reviewing contracts for the actual Westlake development, a project that would break ground the following month under Montgomery Development's leadership. The land had been secured months earlier, part of his long-term strategy that had inadvertently become the perfect trap for Lawrence Bradley. A knock at his door interrupted his work. Diana entered with a final report. Bradley's bail was denied. With the evidence we provided and the testimony from his ex-wives, the prosecutor is confident he'll serve at least 15 years. Russell nodded. And the investors? Most will recover something through the legal process, but several were unregistered deals. They'll have to pursue civil claims. Make sure Flynn, Nolan, and the others who helped us are protected, Russell instructed. They deserve compensation for their part in this. Diana hesitated. Adrian has been trying to reach you. She's facing bankruptcy. The guarantees she signed for Bradley's loans are being called in, and with the divorce settlement already invested in his fraudulent scheme. That's not my concern, Russell stated flatly. She's the mother of your children, Diana reminded him. She conspired with Bradley to destroy me, to steal from me, and to turn my children against me, Russell replied coldly. The consequences of her choices are hers to bear. Another knock interrupted them. Vanessa entered, followed by Dominic. We want to let you know we're moving my things back in, Vanessa said. If that's okay. Russell raised an eyebrow. You're moving back to the penthouse? Dominic stepped forward. Both of us are. Mom's. She's not in a good place right now. Aunt Patricia is staying with her, but we thought. You thought you'd stay with me, Russell finished for him. Vanessa met her father's gaze directly. Unless you're still holding grudges. Russell studied his children thoughtfully. Vanessa had proven her loyalty during the operation against Bradley, demonstrating intelligence and resilience he hadn't fully appreciated before. Dominic had been manipulated but ultimately saw through the deception. There's room for both of you, he decided. But we need to be clear about something. What happened with your mother wasn't a misunderstanding or a temporary lapse in judgment. She made calculated decisions to betray this family. We know, Dad, Vanessa said quietly. We've seen the evidence. We're not asking you to forgive her. Or take her back, Dominic added. Aunt Patricia said Mom's been calling you, talking about reconciliation. Russell's expression hardened. That won't happen. Ever. Later that evening, as promised, Adrian called Russell's private line, a number few people possessed. Russell, please, she began, her voice ragged from crying. I've lost everything. The bank is foreclosing on the house. Lawrence's creditors are coming after me for millions. I made a terrible mistake. Yes, Russell agreed coldly. You did. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, But we have 17 years of history, 2 children. Stop. Russell's voice cut like steel. You chose to believe I was hiding money from you. You chose to involve our daughter in searching my office. You chose to tell our son I abandoned the family. You chose Lawrence Bradley over the life we built. I was manipulated. Adrian protested weakly. No, you were greedy. Russell's tone left no room for debate. Bradley promised you more money than what you thought you'd get in a normal divorce. That's why you went along with his schemes. The silence confirmed his assessment. The children are with me now, Russell continued. They've seen everything, all the evidence, all your choices. I won't turn them against you. Your actions have accomplished that already. What am I supposed to do? Adrian whispered. That's not my problem anymore, Russell replied. Goodbye, Adrian. He ended the call and turned to find Vanessa standing in the doorway of his home office. That was harsh, she observed without judgment. Russell shrugged. It was honest. Vanessa studied her father. Lawrence is going to prison. Mom's lost everything. Your revenge is complete. Has it made you feel better? This wasn't about feeling better, Russell explained. It was about justice and protection. Bradley would have drained your mother dry and moved on to his next victim. Your brother would have been shipped off to Switzerland, isolated from everyone who cares about him. And Mom? Was bankrupting her necessary? Russell met his daughter's gaze directly. I gave her multiple chances to see the truth. She chose not to. Her financial situation is the result of her own decisions. Vanessa nodded slowly. When I was helping you gather evidence, I found something interesting in Bradley's past. His first wife, the one who withdrew the domestic violence complaint, she did it because he threatened her children. Russell waited, sensing this conversation had a purpose. I understand why you can't forgive Mom, Vanessa continued. I'm not asking you to, but I'm asking if your revenge against her is truly complete. Russell considered this carefully. What are you suggesting? Mom made terrible choices, but she's still our mother. Letting her lose everything might satisfy your sense of justice, but it doesn't help Dominic or me. Vanessa squared her shoulders. I'm not asking you to bail her out completely. Just enough so she can start over somewhere modest, away from here. Russell studied his daughter, so much like him in determination, yet with a compassion he had long since buried. I'll consider it, he finally said. Not for her sake, but for yours and your brother's. The following week, Adrian received legal papers. Inside, she found documents transferring ownership of a small condominium in Portland to her name, along with enough money to cover her basic needs for 1 year. The accompanying note read simply, "This is for Vanessa and Dominic. Don't waste this second chance. R." 6 months later, Montgomery Plaza was completed, the crown jewel of Russell's redevelopment vision for the city. At the grand opening, he stood with Vanessa and Dominic, surveying what he had built. You know what I learned from all this? Russell told his children as they gazed at the gleaming tower. It's not enough to build something strong. You have to be willing to protect it with everything you have. Dominic, who had been accepted to engineering school for the fall, nodded thoughtfully. And be careful who you let inside. Exactly, Russell agreed, placing a hand on his son's shoulder. Some damage can't be repaired. Some betrayals can't be forgiven. But you can always rebuild, stronger, smarter, and more carefully than before. As they turned to enter the building for the official ceremony, Russell spotted a familiar face in the crowd, Diana Vega, who had become his most trusted advisor through the ordeal. She caught his eye and nodded slightly, a private acknowledgement of all they had accomplished. Russell returned the nod, his expression resolute. In business and in life, he had learned the price of betrayal and had made sure those who crossed him paid it in full. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end.